We're now joined in studio IndieBio by the CEO of Beemmunity, James Webb. Hi James, thanks for joining us today.
Hi Judy.
So I thought we could begin by talking about the role in protecting these pollinators in what they do, which is to pollinate. How does that affect crop yield or honey yield that these bees will contribute to?
Sure, so by pollination, for a farmer, pollination is a key aspect of their crop yield. It's the way in which plants mate and produce the crops that we eat. And unfortunately, if pesticides kind of come into the equation when it comes to pollination, a lot of the impacts that can have on pollinators might mean that the actual pollination efficiency is reduced. And so for a bee, if you're experiencing pesticides, your navigation might be impaired, your memory might be impaired, and that will affect your foraging and the ability you have to pollinate. And if you look at it in terms of a hive might have to compensate for the losses in which pesticides might give them in terms of the number of deaths that is happening in the hive. The hive will have to compensate by trying to recuperate certain areas of the hive, and that will also affect the overall ability for that hive to pollinate efficiently. And so by detoxifying the pesticides that come into the hive or that a bee might experience or encounter, you can kind of negate those impacts and maintain a good pollination efficiency.
So speaking of hives, I know that your initial experiments were done at the bench, recently published in Nature Foods, amazing, but you have some field trials that are ongoing right now. What can you share with us about the efficacy and the way that your product works in the hive level?
Yeah, so we, as Julie mentioned, we had these lab studies going on, and we found that we could maintain the health of bees that were exposed to pesticides. 80% of the treated ones survived, but 0% didn't. So that was really exciting. But then we took that technology and the protocols from those experiments into the field, and we have a number of hives that we've been trying out this technology on. We've exposed them to pesticides, and we see the benefit of the treatment that we give them. And so we've been measuring the hive weight and then also the number of frames which have bees within each of the hives. And we found we could increase the number of frames of bees by 40% and the hive weight by almost 40%. And so that's a really key indicator that this treatment is maintaining a better health of the hive relative to if it was just left alone and exposed to pesticides as it would be.
So bigger hives, heavier hives, more bees, more pollination.
More pollination, exactly. Happy beekeepers.
Got it. So what does the regulatory process look like to put this product into the environment? If you start putting it into the hives, what types of approvals do you need?
Sure, so luckily our technology is completely naturally derived and the ingredients in that are generally recognised as safe. So it means that the approval process is pretty straightforward for us and we're able to get to market and to beekeepers pretty quick.
Speaking of market, I know you've got a couple different markets. You've got the backyard beekeepers and the professional beekeepers. Can you talk about the size of those markets?
Sure. So the majority of the market is the commercial beekeeper, and typically a commercial beekeeper's main cash crop at the moment is pollination. So beekeepers will travel around the US, visiting various areas of agriculture and pollinating crops for growers. A lot of that happens in California, in almond pollination in February. But unfortunately, because of the losses that beekeepers are experiencing, 26% of the demand for pollination cannot be met because beekeepers just simply don't have the number of hives that they need to meet that demand. And so by reducing their losses, reducing the number of hives which succumb to pesticide exposure, we can allow beekeepers to capture that value that they're losing.
And I know that Beemmunity has been lucky in getting a lot of press recently and building that movement. Can you talk about the role of companies like Beemmunity in building a sustainable infrastructure for the world?
Yeah, so I think the ultimate goal for agriculture would be if we could grow food without taking out more than we're putting back in. But unfortunately, I think that is a reality, and a reality that we're not going to be able to reach for many years to come. And until that time, unfortunately, the wildlife and the ecosystems that we have are going to be damaged continuously by the agriculture that we've set up. And so I think for Beemmunity and maybe other companies that are trying to do similar things, we can be a key tool to mitigate some of this damage and try and suppress some of the impacts that we're making through feeding ourselves. And so whilst I see this as not the ultimate solution, this is definitely a solution which is very needed for the millions of insects, trillions of insects that we have that are key for maintaining and supporting our ecosystems.